So now we're going to practice factoring out greatest common factors from polynomial expressions so that we can solve them by writing those expressions in factored form. So here we go. We have these two examples. What we have to do when we factor is we have to realize how many terms there are. Terms are created by addition and subtraction. So this expression added to this expression means each of these two expressions are considered to be terms. So between the two terms, we have to identify the greatest common factor. We're looking for a GCF, the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is going to consist of the greatest numerical factor of the two terms. So is there a number that divides into both of these? The answer is yes, 1 and 3. We take the greatest of those, which is 3, and then we find the greatest factor between x squared and x cubed. The greatest factor between them is going to be x squared, because you can divide an x squared out of this, and you can divide an x squared out of this. If you divide an x squared out of this, you're left with an x. If you divide an x squared out of this, you're just left with 1. So this is the greatest common factor between these two terms, by looking for the greatest numerical factor and the greatest variable factor between them. So what's going to remain, if you're factoring a monomial out of both of these two terms, you have to end up with a binomial, because this is a binomial. It's what do you multiply this by to get the first term, what do you multiply this by to get the second term. 3x squared times what gets you 3x cubed? Well, you've got the 3 already, so we don't need any numbers. And x squared times what gets us x cubed? X. Plus, now we have to figure out what do we multiply 3x squared by to get this term? Well, 3 times what gets us 18? 3 times 6. And x squared gets us the x squared. We don't need any other x's in our factor there. So, if you want to check your answer, take this and distribute and see if you end up with that, and we do. That's how we know this is the factored form of that polynomial. Let's factor this one. There are two terms. So between the two terms, we have to look at the numbers, 10 and 22. What's the greatest common factor that divides into 10 and divides into 22? And it's going to be 2. Then we have to look at our variable factors and look for the greatest common factor of x cubed and x to the 4th. It's going to be x cubed. And then, if we have a binomial, we better have a binomial as our other factor, because this has to be distributed to two terms, so we end up with two terms. So 2 times what gets us 10? 5. X times what gets us x to the 4th? X. X cubed times x. Remember, you add the exponents, that's how you get that x to the 4th. 2x times what gets us negative 22x cubed? Well, we better have the minus there. 2 times what gets us 22? 11. X cubed, when it goes through, leaves us with an x cubed. There's our answer. This is the factored form of that polynomial. We're going to have to end up factoring to solve equations. These, right now as they are not equations. So you're going to see them later. It's going to say equals 0 with them. And you're going to be told to solve or to find the roots of them. So if you had to solve this, there's no way you can get x by itself by doing operations to both sides. Some of you might be thinking, well, if I subtract that and I divide by 3x squared, the x squared will divide out. But yeah, you're going to lose a solution when you do that. So anytime you're solving a polynomial equation, you're going to use factoring to make sure you get all the solutions. So now, what makes this factor be 0? What do you square to get 0? 0. So if you were to solve this, that would be one of the solutions. And if you were to solve this, what makes x plus 6 be 0? The other solution would be x equals negative 6. But remember, the problem we were given wasn't solved. So we wouldn't do what I did there. You were just told to factor. So factoring means take it from that state to this state. Take it from that state to this state. So make sure you're careful of what the directions are asking you to do. To factor, or to solve.